Hi, and welcome to the Justice for Georgia podcast. My name is Johnny.
My name is Mr. Ambitious, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite icons, legends, contemporaries, and just all-around phenomenal minds, the late, great Malcolm X, and his influence and his part in trying to provide justice in what is still now a fight for Black lives.
And I have to say, that was probably one of the best books I read, and through high school, was actually the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Probably the first reading assignment where I'm just reading ahead, because it's just like, no, this is getting good, this is interesting. And then, seeing the movie with Denzel Washington, who did a phenomenal job, but, didn't really look like him. I loved it. I really did. I loved every second of it. Honestly, I kind of wish we went over Malcolm X more in school if that was possible.
Right. I mean, there's so much to him. He's so multifaceted, and I think to follow his life is truly to take notes on a pure soul. He was genuinely one of those rare people that comes along that wants to make a positive impact and difference in the world. And he did that in many ways, more than he might have imagined. Now, posthumously, if he was able to come and just take notes on what's happening now, he would see how the little things he did had a big influence as well.
Definitely. And I thought it was interesting that, just kind of calling back to our last episode, his father was actually a big supporter of Marcus Garvey.
Right. Before he was murdered by white supremacists, which could lead to some of the reasons why Malcolm felt the way and acted the way he did. So nothing just happens overnight, everybody is a walking, living story, and he was definitely that. So for him to make the decisions and statements that he made later in life was definitely influenced by his childhood, and more so than a lot of people know.
Definitely. Speaking of his childhood, born in Omaha, Nebraska, which I had no idea about that.
Same.
Exactly. Raised in Lansing, Michigan, and this is probably where his story started for me. His father being outspoken the way he was as a Baptist minister, but also outspoken about just civil rights in general, especially being a supporter of Marcus Garvey. So they got a lot of death threats, and I think it was 1929. I want to say their house was burned down, ruled an accident, of course. 2 years later, his father, he was murdered. It was obvious he was murdered, but that was also ruled an accident.
How do you lynch somebody on accident?
Exactly. It just kind of shows you the time period that the U.S. was in, and in some ways still is, where somebody can be killed like that by white supremacists, and then they just rule it an accident because they don't actually want to take any action.
Right. And whenever you hold all the rules and you can enforce them, what you say goes. And basically, white supremacists ran the country at that time, so anybody going against white supremacy was going against the country. So to go further into that, it gives you a sense of where he got his deep need for spirituality from, because he came from a Christian background with a strong religious father, not necessarily a hypocrite, but one who walked the walk and talked the talk. And so that made an impression on him at a young age. And so with all his siblings are running around him, 7 of them, like most families, you try to find your place in it. And in school, he showed a lot of promise. He thought of himself as a possible businessman to influence his community directly. And he, in so many words, says that he was influenced by a teacher who said, you're black, you won't be able to do those things. And he took that to heart. I'm heavily summarizing. I'm just trying to move this along. And he took that to heart, and he went to a life of crime, which is where the first Malcolm, as I call him, came from. He was influenced by someone who could take the place of his father, who gave him some sense of direction how to survive, and he ran with it.
Yeah, so this is going into Detroit Red. He's on the streets, he's committing crimes, he's, just doing random things, whatever. He also knew Red Fox during this time, which I always thought was interesting, because it kind of puts things in perspective. You're seeing this guy on TV, he's a comedian and everything, but he also knew Malcolm X's Detroit Red. I always found that fact fascinating. But yeah, and based on what we know about his life so far, I mean, it makes sense. You know, his mom was institutionalized, you know, for mental health. So him and his siblings bounced around through foster homes and stuff like that. Like, it usually is the end result, unfortunately, because you have no sense of direction. Like you said, you're looking for, you know, that figure in your life, and it a lot of times ends up being the wrong person.
Right, and you know, family equals stability and money equals options. So he had no family and he had no stability. You can't blame him for the outcome that came from that. And so after getting caught up in the wrong lifestyle, he goes into jail where we meet the second Malcolm. And this is the Malcolm that most everybody knows. And strongly religious once again, but this time it was on an Islamic standpoint from the Nation of Islam's perspective. And so he dug straight into the Nation of Islam and was converted in prison.
So this goes into where some of the controversy around Malcolm X comes from. So he's been converted to the Nation of Islam. He's taken on their views. And, you know, some of their views are, you know, they're not really, you know, they're not tolerant of, you know, white people or anything like that. You know, they throw around phrases, you know, blue-eyed devils and stuff like that. So a lot of the controversial things around Malcolm X come from this time period where he's just changed his name to Malcolm X. He's just converted to Nation of Islam, which is not, you know, the Islam he converts to later in life. So, but yeah, I think this is the part where I can understand where people are like, you know, oh, he was controversial and blah blah. But the part they leave out is that, like, well, that's not who he was when he died.
Right. I mean, he made statements like Kennedy being murdered was the chickens coming home to roost, stuff like that, and that's not gonna rub everybody the right way, because Kennedy was one of the few people who was on the sides of black people, so to speak, enough to not only not kill us, but to help further along stuff like the civil rights movement. He negotiated a lot of things in peaceful walks for people integrating schools, and he helped with Martin Luther King and his negotiation with a lot of things before he was assassinated, where Lyndon B. Johnson took over afterwards. But, you know, you're not gonna talk bad about one of the few white guys that was out there helping out black folks. And for him to speak honestly from his heart what he genuinely felt, I think it was a sign of his naivete and at the same time his commitment to his integrity. Because in his heart, he felt what he felt and he said it. He wasn't trying to like doctor nothing, which is why I feel like you gotta respect him for saying it, even though it was something that was probably out of place and unnecessary, but that was just genuinely how he felt. And so that kind of alienated him outside the Nation of Islam, but gave him a lot more power within. Because these are a lot of hurt black people coming together that's tired of not having a seat at the table, who decided to make their own table, and he was speaking for them. And so not only did he say that, he said he wanted justice by any means necessary, another one of his most famous quotes. And I think that attitude is the attitude we are coming back to again today.
And it makes sense. Why? Because we live in a country where MLK's tactics are considered too radical, too extreme, unacceptable, while they've also whitewashed MLK and have basically boiled him down to MLK said, "Don't be mean to white people." That's pretty much how this country has tried to use his legacy against us, which is, for me, it's ineffective, because I know if he was here and he was seeing the Black Lives Movement, he'd be like, you know, hey guys, go harder. You know, we need to be doing more. We need to be more disruptive and things of that nature. But back to Malcolm X, the one thing I want to keep in perspective is the time period. You know, the whites only signs and, you know, all type of just blatant racism that's less blatant today. It exists in different forms, but it's far less blatant. Where before, you know, they show up and burn a cross in your front yard if you move into a neighborhood you're not supposed to be in. Whereas now they'll use, you know, banks, redlining, and that type of stuff to keep us from buying homes and, you know, neighborhoods they don't want us in. So when you keep all those things in mind, you can understand why people had a different mindset, you know, as far as like, you know, wanting to join the Nation of Islam today. I mean, back then, whereas today, we might say, you know, oh, we find, that decision unacceptable.
Right. And, the blatant racism you're talking about there, that whole Jim Crow,
Yep.
black people was just flat out saying they were sick of it, and they understood the consequences of Jim Crow. They didn't understand the consequences of segregation. They just knew that they didn't want the negative consequences of segregation and Jim Crow anymore. And so you saw all types of movements, and Malcolm was the figurehead and voice of the Nation of Islam and their movement. And a lot of this power that he was able to tap into and take advantage of was starting to show itself in many different ways within the Nation of Islam, causing some rifts in power between him and the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And there was a view of whether or not he was going to be the successor or Elijah Muhammad's son. And so in that whole process, in the Nation of Islam, you got to go through your pilgrimage, and you go back to Mecca, and you go where the holy city is in the Middle East, and Malcolm did his. And upon arriving, he was introduced to a whole new world. Like I was saying, this is a pure soul. He was seeing things on face value, and oftentimes things run deeper than that. Well, this was his face value experience that not all white people are blue-eyed evil devils. Here we had people from all over the world, curly hair, straight hair, dark skin, light skin, all praying to the same God, arm in arm, believing that there was good inside them and in each other. And this changed his whole perspective. So much so he changed his name. He was no longer, in his mind, or privately amongst his family and friends, Malcolm X. Now he was Malcolm El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. And so he still maintained the name publicly of Malcolm X. But in his heart and in his mind, he had a new identity. And this is where the third Malcolm came in. And he was actually doing and applying a lot of the Garveyism in what he was trying to do. He piggybacked off of that and reached out to several people, Malcolm X, Carmichael, many different people in America, along with other countries like Algiers, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Middle Eastern countries, trying to unite black people worldwide to come together and say, hey, enough is enough. Not necessarily on the kicking they do and take what they got, but on the let's open each other's arms to each other and take care of our family. And so when he made that pivot after leaving the Nation of Islam, a lot of people didn't like not only that pivot, but they felt like he was being a hypocrite from his original message with the Nation of Islam. And also the after effects of just dealing with the politics of the Nation of Islam caught up with him, which led to his ultimate controversial assassination.
Yes, and this assassination is so controversial because they try to make it seem like it's just straightforward, oh, well, Nation of Islam, they had them, somebody from there upset with them, killed them, open shut case. But all this time while he was talking to all these people from other countries, visiting other countries, doing all these things, outreach to other black people, trying to, get some unity going, the CIA is keeping tabs on him the entire time, everywhere he's going. I mean, he even points it out himself in his autobiography, like, he's out in, I don't remember, was it Egypt? He was somewhere out riding camels with somebody, and they turn around, you got two white guys in suits following him everywhere on camels. Who else is it but the CIA? So they kept tabs on him everywhere, constantly. Sometimes to the point where it's obvious, tapping phones, things like that, very invasive. He had no privacy. So to me, it was pretty obvious during this entire time. They're just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it.
Right.
That's all they were doing. They were just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. And he knew it. He knew it.
Yeah, he had to go. And it was a matter of time for the FBI and the CIA. They were running, at that time, we didn't know, COINTELPRO, the whole program to break up and destroy what could have been the Black Messiah. And he was one of those top people on the list as the possible Black Messiah. Him, Martin Luther King, ironically, James Baldwin. A lot of people don't know that he has the biggest FBI file of anyone. They really thought that he would be the one that would come and unite everybody. But nonetheless, he was on that list. And as it turned out for them, they just saw the fire already burning in the Nation of Islam and him and their rift. So they just fanned the flames and pretty much funded and assisted with what would ultimately be the day that he would be assassinated. And so most of the time, most people will take from his story and his life those main points of being a pure soul, trying to make a difference, and making your own table, but they leave out a lot of what really fueled him in his fight for justice. I think if we were to apply today what it was that Malcolm was trying to say, it was ultimately, we have to be our own savior. And we can't wait for someone to fall out the sky or some next Messiah to come from Damascus or whatever else. All the tools we have, we need, we don't have to go anywhere else and get what we need. We have them. Let's just use them in a community way. So ultimately, we can learn a whole lot from how he tried to blend spirituality along with the actual walk and talk of justice. They go hand in hand. I can go on all day about Malcolm. That dude was just true.
He really was. He really was. And it just, to me, what made it so relatable is like, the redemption story that he had going from, Detroit Red all the way to, El Shabazz, like the journey. To me, that's what made it so relatable and also so powerful that, you don't have to be from the second you're born the perfect being to lead a movement. You can be a flawed person, but just get out here and just do your part, do what you can, and by any means necessary.
Right, by any means necessary. And if you're looking at by any means necessary today, a lot of this wouldn't be happening. Folks, a man was beat up in Harlem. Malcolm organized everybody, went down there. They was like, you put another hand on him without getting, we gonna make it a problem. Cops was like, okay, we don't want to let dude go. If we had that every time someone was shot, nowadays, not showing up and asking questions, demanding the same justice they provide for these police officers, I think the conversation would be a little different. They wouldn't be worried about us taking a knee. They'd be scared we gonna be kicking in their door. So, like you said, Malcolm being the more radical on the violent side, so they wanted to make it seem, and Martin being the more non-violent, peaceful protester, they take out of context what it was both of them were saying.
Exactly, they really do. They really do. Malcolm X was saying self-defense. That is something that when a black man says it, I'm about to just ruin this James Baldwin quote. When a black man says, give me liberty or give me death, he's a radical, he's a terrorist, whatever. But when a white man says the exact same thing, holding a gun, he's a patriot.
Right.
Exactly. So you see the hypocrisy there.
It don't make sense. Like the guy up in New York talking about, you're going to take away my right to open my bar. I'm not going to follow the system. And then at the same time, I'm American. So me being a rebel and not following the system is me being American. What kind of craziness we got going on here? This man can run over a cop with his car while being arrested on tape and be walking in daylight the next week on TV talking about, if y'all see it, watch the investigation, the truth will come out. We seen the truth.
Yeah, we saw it.
The mental, I can't even describe that. Like, how do you make sense out of that? But then when you have someone who has a well-written out, documented explanation of what they want from life, like Malcolm did, and he still was like, well, this Negro's gonna come in and shoot us all up because he doesn't like white folks. No, it's not what he was saying. He said, you come in here trying to shoot me, expect to go into a fight.
Exactly.
You're not gonna walk into a house of people that's just gonna put their hands up and say, well, you got me. So, towards the end of his life, Malcolm was on the side of good people. He was more concerned with good people versus white people. But the news and propaganda that was going out there was that he was against white people. And so it kind of split his message up and split up his audience so that people who were good, that were white, couldn't hear what he was saying now because they tried to take what he was saying out of context.
Yeah, which is crazy because I know he had said some controversial things about white people while he was with Nation of Islam, but afterwards, El Shabazz himself, and you can find the recordings, they're out there. He's saying with open arms, like, oh yeah, you know, we want your support and your help. Right. He would not have said that if he hated white people. He wouldn't have said that. All he really wanted to push was self-defense, which is, you know, that's unacceptable for black people to push that. Just like, you know, MLK just wanted to push the mass movement, shut the bridges down, shut everything down, disrupt until we get what we want. And they've kind of, you know, brainwashed people and rewrote history because now that, you know, they're trying to act like back then he wasn't seen as a radical. There's a political cartoon that actually shows MLK talking with a reporter, and there's a city burning behind him. And he's saying, you know, we're going to have our peaceful protest again next week. So even then, he was a crazy radical. So how they rewrote him doesn't make any sense to me. Just how they painted Malcolm X as this dude that just promoted just widespread violence. Where was it? Where was that at? I saw very, you know, disciplined black men, you know what I'm saying, taken to the streets, very organized and making demands. I didn't see widespread violence. I didn't see them pulling cops out of a cop car and beating them, right, or shooting them or nothing like that. It's just saying we're here. Right. We're gonna defend ourselves.
Right. You talking about a bunch of clean-cut black guys. Some of them had perms. So I mean, like, what? They wasn't thinking about, like, they selling bean pies and stuff like that. They wasn't thinking about kicking in anybody's doors. If you make a delicious bean pie, you gotta have something good about you. You know what I mean? Like, something's gotta be genuine inside you. Like, I can't accept just all this negative and you just ignore completely positive. I mean, even to this day, you're still gonna see them on the corner handing out these newspapers, selling bean pies, trying to wake up the people in their community they feel like they can help. And so that's what he represented. And that's what they did. I mean, like, Malcolm was the embodiment of that. So yeah, they took a lot of what he said out of context. And I still to this day, I don't roll with a lot of stuff I see on TV, because after I done did my research and I found out all this stuff about him, it's like, yo, they was painting this dude out like he was wearing a black Ku Klux Klan member robe, showing up to the same meetings with a different crowd of people. So he had a completely different story. Now let's do something on J. Edgar Hoover, and let's see if you don't get this dude who was cross-dressing behind doors telling everybody else gays was wrong and stuff like this. You don't see that story on the news. You still don't today, even though they know this. But they still will go out their way to try and paint Malcolm and other leaders as these radicals that are going to destroy your home. All this other crazy nonsense. So yeah.
Exactly. And the legacy of that, basically the way they're portraying people, taking the words out of context, all that stuff, it continues today with Kaepernick. One of the most, I want to say, passive movements I've seen, where it's literally just like, hey guys, I'm not gonna stop you from shopping at the mall. I'm not gonna stop you from watching a football game. I'm not gonna stop you from going where you want to go. I'm not gonna block your car. I'm not gonna do any of that. Just while they're saying national anthem, I'm gonna sit on this bench. And then a veteran wrote to him and said, hey, you know, I think sitting is disrespectful. However, kneeling has always been a sign of respect. So if you could kneel instead, I'd appreciate that. Kaepernick reads his letter. Okay, thank you, because that's how passive this protest he was doing was. He wasn't even trying to really offend, you know, people like that, as long as you had a logical argument behind it. This veteran did. So from that point on, Kaepernick kneeled, and that was seen as just too extreme, too radical, going too far.
Oh my God, this football player doesn't know his place. Come on. So I mean, apparently his only role in life is not to be seen as a black man, but to be seen on the Sunday or Monday night or Thursday night football game, playing the sport, making people happy, throwing the ball. The fact that he might be a victim of the same police brutality and he was speaking up about it didn't resonate at all. And you got the president who's lost more in these past few weeks than anybody going for presidential office, saying he's a son of a bitch and all this other nonsense. Yo, it's ridiculous. So people see what they want to see, and clearly these racists saw what they wanted to see when they looked at Malcolm, when they looked at Kaepernick, and when they looked at Donald Trump. So yeah, Like, what was the crazy dude from Alabama, the black dude? He used to call him the Great White Hope. He called Trump that. And I feel like that was kind of the way. I can't remember his name. He goofy dude. I mean, like, he just funny looking. Just say all kind of ridiculousness. I'm gonna remember his name for next week.
Yeah, I don't remember which black for Trump you're talking about because there's so many crazy ones out there.
They're all crazy.
My favorite one, exactly.
Yo, come on.
Let me tell you about my favorite one. My favorite one, Trump's in the White House, and this black dude's across the table from him talking. He's like, I've talked to all the gang leaders in Chicago, you know what I'm saying? They said they like you, they really support you, so they're gonna stop all the crime in Chicago. And it's like, who is this random dude that got more power than, you know what I'm saying, anybody else in the city of Chicago? This random dude nobody's ever heard of. And he got it like that? How? How?
So yeah, it's people see what they want to see. When they looked at Malcolm, they saw what they wanted to see. What I get as a takeaway from what I saw and what I see when I look at Malcolm is someone who genuinely had naive ambitions, and he used different vehicles to try and make those very grand dreams come true. And it's ultimately just the safety of anyone who's black, not only in America, but around the world, to be able to have the ability to eat, drink, and be married. Just that simple.
Exactly.
And so the means about going about doing it changed as time went on. And the message he used to say that changed, but I think at its heart, it never really was anything different than that.
Exactly. You put it perfectly. The only thing I would say, that I feel like I really learned from him or anything like that, is that say how you feel. Say the message that you want to put out there. So, if you want to say by any means necessary, say by any means necessary. If you want to say Black Lives Matter, say Black Lives Matter. If you want to say defund the police, say defund the police. Because I feel like there's a strong consensus of people that want to be like, oh, people could take that the wrong way. They can take that the wrong way. They can take that the wrong way. They can take anything they want to take the wrong way. So I'm not gonna waste time doing that. I'm gonna say what I want to say. And if you want a logical explanation from me on why I'm saying that, me personally, everybody feels like that. I'll give you the explanation, but you're not gonna tell me don't say that because I'm not gonna listen to you.
Right. And on top of that, how was y'all taking the people getting murdered?
Exactly.
Ain't nobody taking that the wrong way. So you can't confuse looking at a video of somebody being shot in the back after breaking up a fight, you know what I mean, versus a police officer grabbing an old man out of his car and shooting him on the back road. Where's the conversation about these corrupt, crooked cops doing these cowardly murders of people, but us saying, don't fund those same cowardly cops is radical. Oh my God.
It's going too far. Exactly.
How dare you not give money to the people murdering you? What? So we supposed to be stupid or some shit.
Exactly. And to end this with a little bit of hope, I want to say that, so it's very negative that still to this day, people still look at Malcolm X saying by any means necessary as negative, right? But a little bit of hope that I have is that we've seen in, about half a decade, that Black Lives Matter went from being this radical slogan that it was just too controversial. People should never say that. You need to change the slogan to 2020, and all these companies are just like, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter is acceptable. So exactly. It's all about the money. But we know we can change the conversation if we're forceful and persistent. Because I was gonna say stubborn. Persistent.
Same difference.
Yeah, same difference. As long as we're persistent with our message. So I think that's a good note to end that one on.
Right.
Yep. This has been the Justice for Georgia podcast, our episode on Malcolm X. I'm totally happy we were able to do this episode today.
Same Malcolm that dude. Do some research on him. Find out what you can. I promise you. You see who you are. So when you look at him, I promise you'll see yourself when you look at him. Because he was a man of the people.
Definitely.
Anyways, I'm Mr. Ambitious.
I'm Johnny. Justice for Georgia podcast, signing off.